MoneySense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community.
A very good morning and warm welcome to MoneySense. I'm delighted to be joined this morning, hosting the show, as always, by Neville Hicks. Good morning, Neville.
Good morning.
And today's show is focused on understanding the economics of medical tourism and the healthcare facility on island, Health City. With this in mind, we are delighted to be joined in the studio here by the CEO of Health City, Dr. Chandy, and their Director of Marketing, Shamari Scott. Gentlemen, a very warm welcome to MoneySense this morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning, and thanks for having us here on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be hosting you. So let's start off the conversation. Medical tourism and healthcare. Let's try and define what medical tourism is and what the background to it is. So perhaps you can help me understand that, and then we can get into some nitty-gritty about what it is you do here on island.
Yeah. So I think medical tourism, in a very broad sense, is when people cross borders to actually access healthcare. So that's sort of broad term for medical tourism. The estimates of medical tourism, because you could have the term borders could mean the borders within a country. It could mean the borders across countries. So, you have what's called domestic medical tourism if it's within a country. So you could have someone, say, in a big country like the US, somebody from, say, the north goes down to say, South Florida and gets care, and that's domestic medical tourism. Or they could actually fly out, say, to another country and get treatment. The estimates for this kind of cross-border tourism, the numbers actually vary. But in 2014, there was some kind of a number, and they say that close to 50 million people travel like this to access healthcare, both domestic and international medical tourism.
Why? It seems sort of somewhat strange to me to think, why do people take the risk of going from one country to another? You tend to understand your own country's healthcare system. You go to another country and it's potentially a risk because you don't know what the doctors are, you don't know what the medical facilities, you don't know what the systems, the laws and regulations are. Why do people do that?
Yeah. So Simon, what we've discovered here, it's very interesting. Why people move is different for different regions. So for example, if you take the region we are in here currently, the Caribbean, very often people would move because that service just doesn't exist there. Or if it does exist, it's very fledgling. It's something that's just started. People are not very confident about it. So then they decide, okay, we need to go to a center where the service is, already mature and where we can actually access good care. So it could be that it's not existent there. It could be that it's very fledgling or something that's very small. In a place like, say, Canada, you've got very high quality care. And it's free. You can't get more affordable than that. And but the waiting times, it's rationed out. So you may have somebody who is waiting for a knee replacement, and it could be as long as 3 years, 2 to 3 years, to actually get on the list to get it done. So they may decide, okay, I'm not going to wait so long. I'm in a lot of pain. I need to get this done quickly. They may start looking at alternatives where they can actually get this done much quicker. And then you have the whole issue about affordability. Now, could be right across the board. People will look for places where they can get high quality care at an affordable price, because the region they are in, it could be outpriced in terms of their insurance or the kind of resources that they have. So they start looking at other regions where they can get that. And the reason I said high quality and then affordable is people will never move just for affordable care. They'd always look at the quality of care before moving.
So it's more of a balance when you look at where you decide to go, or where you need, or the requirements around that.
When you're talking, Shamari, for instance, you're marketing director at Health City. How on earth do you persuade somebody to leave? Let's say Ohio, and come down to Cayman when they perhaps don't know where Cayman is on a map? How do you persuade someone? How do you market the services of the organization to these people?
And I'm going to answer that question, but I just wanted to touch on what Dr. Chandy was saying as well, just so that people can have a good appreciation why persons would leave a country such as the U.S. as well, which has, to come to your point, which has high quality of healthcare. Depending on where you go, you can find it. Also, if somebody has an ailment and it isn't FDA approved, but let's say it's proven in Europe or it's proven in Australia. At times, persons also would move to get that treatment that they aren't able to get in the U.S. Before the ACA, Obamacare, right? Pre-existing conditions. If you had a pre-existing condition and you have a heart ailment, and then you start before, when you have insurance, you don't really know the true cost of what because you're just paying copay and deductibles. But if you had a pre-existing condition, or for whatever reason you didn't have insurance, when you actually go to the hospital to find out how much that valve replacement or how much the knee replacement will cost, that's when you get shocked that it's like $80,000 or $150,000 versus a high quality destination such as Health City that you get it for a fourth of the price that you'd be able to get it in the U.S. as well. So coming back to your point now, why somebody in the U.S.? When we first started the project, the ACA wasn't properly implemented as yet. So when you look at your target demographic, what you would be looking at is, somebody who has enough disposable income, was wealthy enough, because they didn't need to by law have insurance. For whatever reason, they're like, I'm healthy, I don't need insurance, I'm not paying for it. And then either a parent or a spouse or themselves get into trouble, whether it's cardiac or orthopedics and such. And then they check to see, okay, how much does this cost? And it's way above, they would have to use their entire life savings in order to afford it. That's when they start shopping to see where a place that has an affordable price, but of course high quality, would crop up to the top. But however, when the ACA came in, they mandated that you needed to have insurance, and you could get it privately or you could go through your company, and more people were covered by insurance. So that target demographic kind of dried up. Yes, there's still some people who slipped through the cracks, but for the most part, that dried up. But the good thing is that there's another population there within the U.S., which is the self-insured companies, which they're motivated to reduce costs because they're ultimately paying for it. So, and they're also more innovative than the traditional larger companies, just due to the red tape and the amount of time it takes them to move. It reminds me a little bit at sometimes, not our government, but government entities, right? See, ex-civil servant talking here, okay? So it takes them, so those are the Blue Crosses and the Cignas that we're in conversations with, but it'll take them longer. But you have half of the population of the working class in the U.S. that are under the self-insured bracket, that are motivated, they have innovative thinkers, they're looking to reduce costs, they're looking at high quality, and that's the target that we go after in the U.S.
And I want to come on and talk about the Affordable Health Care Act and what the implications of some of the changes are, perhaps without us all getting too political on disposed. But before I do that, I want to drill down a little bit further onto this question of almost trust. So you've got somebody who's sitting in Canada, the US, or Jamaica, it could be anywhere in the world, who could come to Health City here. Why on earth should they think, well, how do you demonstrate as medical professionals that you're of a quality that they should trust to use? What is the process that you go through for that?
Yeah. So, most of the time when you're looking at the way an institution is credentialed, there are two ways you can do it. So one is to have a third party credential you. And these are accreditation bodies. So we've got the accreditation from one of the largest bodies in the world. It's called the Joint Commission International. So the Joint Commission, America actually started off by accrediting hospitals in the US. And then they developed an international arm which actually goes and accredits hospitals across the world. And we've got the Joint Commission accreditation. In fact, we got it about a year after we started. It's probably one of the fastest accreditations that have taken place. And so that's third-party validation. So you've got somebody who's not with you. And the way they do this is pretty rigorous. So 5 people came down for 5 days. And they go through every single process in the hospital. They actually talk to patients. They talk to staff. And they look at all the things that go on in the hospital. They look at your data sets. And at the end of it, they say, okay, you're credentialed, you're accredited to with our logo and with our, what would you say? They say you're, Joint Commission accredited. That's the word they use.
And I call it the FDA stamp of approval for the general layperson.
And when was that? When
that happened actually, so April of 2015.
Because I guess you would need some run time to kind of get those processes in place, get
Correct,
some patient
yeah.
feedback.
Yeah, so the minimum is a year, and we did it in a year.
Okay.
And this thing, because you need to put all of that in place.
And are there other hospitals in Cayman or the region that have that?
In the
approval?
region, there's one other hospital
Okay.
that has, that's in the whole of the Caribbean. There's one other hospital that's Joint Commission accredited.
And you mentioned something, or one of you mentioned that one reason patients may come down here is that there's a procedure which is approved in Europe but perhaps not approved in the US, or approved in the US and not in Canada. I guess as a naive non-medical professional, definitely not a medical professional, should I be worried about something like that? Someone will say, oh, well, this is approved in Europe. Well, the US has said no. Should I be saying, actually, maybe that's a dangerous procedure then? How do you address that sort of problem?
No, these are not procedures for which the US has said no. The US is still evaluating it. So the US usually lags behind most of the advanced countries. So if you look at Europe, you look at Australia, you look at Canada.
Now you're getting into politics there.
Yeah.
Be careful there.
No, the FDA, this is a well-known fact, so it isn't this thing. The FDA always is almost the last among the developed countries to approve procedures. Because they have this, it just goes very slow there. So you could have a procedure that's been going on in Europe for, say, 4 years and fantastic results coming out of it. And it's being used all across the world, but it'll take a little longer for it to get accredited by the FDA. So that's, I just talked about third-party accreditation, but there's also the validation of what you're doing by looking at your data. You need to audit what you're doing, and you should be able to put it. So we do have actually in cardiac surgery and in orthopedics, there are also what are known as third-party registries. We have actually signed into those, and we put our data into that.
Okay.
And we can actually get the output from that.
And are those available for patients to look at then?
It'll take, I think, about 1 or 2 years for that data to become meaningful.
Okay. Because it's not statistically significant at the moment.
Yeah, you need to get. So we have the data for the last 2-3 years. We've started putting the data in now. And you can get preliminary data which shows that it's pretty good. But you have to wait for a little more time as more data goes in.
Great. So look, we have to take a short break. When we come back after the break, I want to continue this conversation and orient the conversation to the startup of Health City. What was the genesis of it, and why, and the business planning for it. But if you would just have to take a short break, 1 minute, rejoin the conversation with Dr. Chandy and Shamari Scott from Health City.
This is
MoneySense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community. Brought to you by the CFA Society Cayman Islands and sponsored by One Trade X.
And now, more Money Sense.
Welcome back. In the second half of today's show, we are going to continue our conversation on the healthcare industry and the role of Health City here in the Cayman Islands with Dr. Chandy, CEO of Health City, and Shamari Scott, Marketing Director. Gentlemen, once again, thank you for joining us and for being here this morning.
Thank you.
So, Health City as a concept, to help me understand what or why that existed. I read that Dr. Shetty, who is the founding guide behind the Health City organisation, he won an award a few years ago issued by the Economist magazine for innovation in healthcare and health science. Is that the basic premise as to why Health City exists and why it hopes to be and how it hopes to be successful? Just talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think the genesis of the idea is it started off in India, where Dr. Shetty, after being trained as a cardiac surgeon, he came back to India, and he actually worked in Calcutta. And cardiac surgery is very expensive, and there was this huge swath of people in India who couldn't really access it. They may have required it, but they couldn't access it. So, and he actually was the personal physician to Mother Teresa, and he attributes a lot of his impetus to do this from watching Mother Teresa. And he said he needs to actually be able to improve access to high-tech tertiary care. And he started off with cardiac surgery. And the principle is, as you get increasing volumes, you should be able to actually reduce the price. And he has a goal in mind where it becomes accessible to most people. And that's what he started in India. It started off as a cardiac hospital. We've got a huge cardiac hospital, about 1,000-bedded hospital, which does almost 34 open-heart operations every day. Wow. In India, and the access to care is there for people from all walks of life. And from there we've expanded. Now we've got 28 hospitals in all specialties now, including oncology and nephrology, urology, all the tertiary care specialties. And that idea, then he said, it needs to be something that's broadcast worldwide. And it comes through innovation. It comes through commitment to the patient to improve access. So if you look at it, the single principle, if you want to call it, is to improve access to high quality care. That's the principle. And it's a principle which is viable here in this region, and for which there are lots of patients who are waiting for that kind of care.
Well, let's drill into that, because I naively, when I look in Cayman, I look at the number of doctors and I think, crikey, there's a lot of doctors. Why on earth is there another hospital being set up? You can't walk down some streets without bumping into doctors' surgeries. Why was Cayman chosen? It's a small, tiny population. It's not like India with, 1.2, 1.3 billion people. The market is very small. So why Cayman as an opportunity?
Well, what's interesting in regards to why Cayman, and just going to quickly touch on when you're speaking about medical tourism. Usually it was tried previously in the Caribbean, but 2 or 3 things happen. To your point, when you have over 30 islands within a Caribbean and 41 million people, no one island really has enough of a base to become experts at what you're doing, or to the level or quality, because call it practicing medicine, kind of like in sports, perfect practice makes perfect, right? So the more you practice, and what Dr. Chandy said, and sometimes Dr. Chandy being a physician for the lay person, so he mentioned 34 open hearts a day. Somebody may say, oh, okay, and not realize that a good hospital may do that in a month, right? So doing just so people can get the scale, that a Dr. Benoit that we have within our facility would have done 10,000 procedures, whereas somebody at his skill level may retire doing 5,000. So you start to understand the quality behind the physicians. The great thing about Health City, and at times when I have a presentation, I show that you had a system with the CEO of that high producing system, which is Dr. Chandy, who came from the #1 cardiac facility within the Narayana Group, 28 hospitals in India. You have all of the physicians within. You have the processes in that allow for lean management and allow you to get the highest quality. And what we think we did, which is the first that's been done in the world, is that we don't have rotating physicians. And Dr. Chandy will be able to explain how, from a quality perspective, if you have rotating physicians, you can't really control what they're doing in your facility. But when you have salaried physicians that are there with you, they have to go by your protocols. What we did, and if somebody can imagine a well-functioning hospital in India, and you have on one hand, we picked up that hospital, carried it across the seas with all the expertise over years, all the physicians and the system, and dropped it into a location right outside the U.S. waters. Now, prior to this conversation, we were talking about when Dr. Shetty came here, and he said the ideal scenario is to have a cruise ship with physicians on it, 7 miles outside of U.S. waters. Well, we have an island, hundreds of miles, but close to U.S. waters, where we put this facility with all of the best physicians and everything that is there behind it. So we actually picked it up and put it here, and that's what allows us to actually be successful. Now, that being said, our goal isn't to just treat the local population. Now, and when you do marketing and you do research, there needs to be some gap that's there, that the service you're providing adds value. Prior to Health City being here, just due to the population, there wouldn't be enough of a population to have the best physicians, a cath lab to do life-saving heart procedures.
People here.
Correct.
You just don't have the volume.
Right? But knowing what our goal is, and it's a phased approach where first we needed the local community to embrace us. And the reason we needed that is because we're such a diverse island. We have over 120 different nationalities. The first day you go to Barbados, Trinidad, Jamaica, and you talk about the gaps they have where they're sending people to the U.S., but you can do it for cheaper, as well as just as high quality, if not better, in the Cayman Islands. The first thing they do is pick up the phone and call somebody they know in the Cayman Islands. Now, if the persons in the Cayman Islands are either neutral or have a negative perception, that conversation goes no further. So we had to get the local people on first. We're filling a gap. And then reach out into the Caribbean. As Dr. Chandy mentioned, access is one of those pain points why people would travel. And there are a lot of people in the Caribbean who either would travel and spend a lot of money in the U.S. and put houses up for mortgage and the such to afford it, or they just would go without. They have a certain level of savings, let's say 10, 15,000, but they don't have 100,000 or 150,000. Those people get access here. And we then needed JCI accreditation, so that's that FDA stamp of approval, plus enough persons trying us that a patient can go online and see many persons who look like themselves from the US and Canada saying, this thing is the greatest place that we've ever been, you need to come. And then we were able to get US patients. Then we were able to get Canadian patients. So why Cayman? Safe, English speaking, first world infrastructure. So every reason why we have such a buoyant financial services industry here. Guess who's most important in this scenario? The physician. Why is a physician going to leave a practice where he is the best thing since sliced bread? People know him. He has a buoyant practice that's just growing. To move to a country, you need certain things. They have young kids. Educational system needs to be good. All of the reasons why guys from financial services and other areas move here are the things that allow doctors to move here and allow then patients from the US and Canada and other places to feel comfortable traveling here to avail themselves of the high quality of service.
So Health City has been in operation for about
3 years. A little over 3 years.
How do you measure and answer the question, what's been the economic impact of Health City in the Cayman Islands? How do you address that question?
Yeah, so what's interesting is that the Chamber did a great series where they talked about Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. And it's interesting when you look at the different principles. I said, wow, I wonder if Health City is the only one that meets every tier, right? Because we give direct service, specialty service to persons who need it on island. We also stop leakage from going overseas. 'Cause prior to us being here, there were 300 air ambulances that would have needed to leave for heart or brain that are now that money staying within the economy.
Yep.
And we're bringing in foreign investment in regards to persons traveling in to actually stay. So I know a lot of times persons will talk about, they see what the agreement says in regards to concessions and hundreds of millions of dollars of concessions, but you have to take those concessions. We've utilized $3.5 million worth of concessions, and over the first 3 years, we estimate $60 million in regards to direct economic impact, and that doesn't include the multiplier effect.
And so, and I think you mentioned something there, Dr. Chandy, all your physicians are salaried physicians, so they all live and spend their money on island. So that X million gets reinvested into the community because people are living on island.
Absolutely. So not only the doctors, we've got technicians, nurses, all of them living here with their families. So they are living within the community, spending the money within the community.
We're running out of time as we always do on this show. But how big can Health City Cayman Islands get? Where's the big goal in this?
Yeah. So the final goal is over the next 20 years. We need the hospital itself will expand into more buildings. We're going to have more specialties within the campus. We're going to have a research facility. We're going to have an assisted living facility and a medical school. So that's the vision over the next 20 years. And that's going to also impact the economy. It's going to provide opportunities for local people to actually come in and train. And we want to eventually have an international pool of personnel, both physicians, technicians, all who are trained to the highest level.
Fascinating. Look, it's a fascinating subject, and I think one where we've often been asked, how do we recommend, or how can Cayman diversify its economy away from financial services, which are at the whim in so many respects of factors outside of our control? And of course, people who come into medical tourism are still exposed to the state of the economy. But people need medicine almost irrespective of what the economy is, whether they can afford it. Of course, you're making it more affordable.
Yeah, and one of the things which, again, we can talk a lot about is there have been a lot of high net worth individuals who've been coming to the island and coming to the hospital, looking at the healthcare facilities, and then buying property on the island, saying that, now I know the healthcare is good, so I can. And I'm talking about really high net worth individuals. They come to the hospital, see it. So you're getting an investment which may not show up directly.
Sure. It's a derivative of
We've also had people actually move their residences from other places in the Caribbean. I don't know how good it's for the Caribbean, but it's very good for Cayman, I can tell you.
Great stuff. Well, look, thank you, gentlemen, both of you, Dr. Chandy and Shamari, for joining us this morning. It's been a most enlightening conversation. But I am afraid our time is up, so thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
As a final note then, before we leave, I wish once again to thank all of our listeners for tuning in and remind you that today's show can and will be able to be heard as a podcast on the CFA Society Cayman Islands webpage, and encourage anyone who has a question or topic that they wish us to cover to either email us at moneysense@candw.ky, or, as we are so technologically advanced, tweet us at MoneySense Radio. Be sure to follow or post any questions there, and we will do our best to reply. With that, thank you once again, goodbye, and please do tune in to MoneySense in 2 weeks' time.
MoneySense is brought to you with the support of OneTradeX. OneTradeX, the Cayman Islands' #1 choice for online brokerage.